Hey hotties, welcome back to another week of Oddie Hotties. This week is exciting. We have our first guest, and as exciting and wonderful as it was, our microphone wasn't exactly ready to take on the extra input. So the editing and sound this week is a little funky, and we appreciate your patience and thank you for listening. Welcome back to Oddie Hotties. This week we are doing very first interview with someone super special about PDA.
Hi. I'm apparently super special. I did not know that. Thank you, McKenna.
Very welcome. Hotties.
Yeah, welcome to the Audie Hottie podcast.
Here we are. My name is McKenna.
And I'm Brie.
Hi, I am Gabby. I have autism, in case that wasn't clear. I am an occupational therapist, so we three met doing early
And
intervention.
we make the trifecta.
And we make the trifecta. Yes.
The Holy Trinity.
The Holy Trinity of rehab. I see you went Catholic with it, and that's fine. I was gonna go Triforce, like Legend of Zelda. Like when the three of us get together, it's very autistic of me.
Well, we're so grateful that you're here.
I am so glad to be here.
Yeah. So I wanted to get started with some updates for the week. Any updates or anything either of you want to share?
Yeah. So
Brie?
Marina's adorable. And after listening to our special interest episode, she bought me a horse. It's a Briar horse. The big size ones that I said I missed having as a kid. It's my favorite, the Frisian. And I asked her when she brought it out. Well, she just had it sitting on a shelf and expected me to notice it. And then I'm like, what's that? And she was like, what? What are you talking about?
She's so
that?
That's really
thoughtful.
cute. Oh my goodness.
I asked her after I saw it. I was like, when did you get that? And she was like, well, I was listening to the episode.
I mean,
That's
the funny
really
thing is
precious.
I definitely was thinking of doing the same exact thing for your birthday. Which I love that me and Lauren think alike.
Yeah.
Great minds.
Maybe you'll have two.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Ooh, can you find me a baby for you?
I can try my best.
But I am gonna have my own stable of horses apparently between everybody.
Oh my gosh, we could start making a stable. Like a little mini
Yes.
dollhouse situation, but
100%. Yes, that's what we should do
Oh,
for you
People are making
and all
me
your
blush.
creatures.
the dream.
Satisfying the inner child. Any other updates?
I have been hyperfixating on one of my favorite old musicals this week, Rent.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Yes, you guys know Rent? Yeah.
Do I know Ren?
You
I-
said?
Am gay. And I figured it out by watching Idina Menzel perform Take Me or Leave Me in Rent. And I was like, oh, okay. That's not a very heterosexual response.
The gay awakening.
14-year-old me was like, maybe I should do some soul searching.
I remember watching it as a kid and loving it, just watching it on repeat, knowing all of the lyrics to all of the songs, and still didn't come out until I was 26.
Denial is a very powerful thing.
Well, I think it's lack of introspective skills, but either
Tomato,
or.
tomato.
Tomato. Who
Yeah.
knows?
We'll probably repeat this later on, talking about it in a episode about queerness and intersection. But mine was watching Xena, Warrior Princess. As a kid, I watched
That's valid.
religiously.
Totally for the plot.
Really like watching this for some reason. I don't know why.
So it reminded me of how much I loved that musical and that music and all this stuff.
I had a bag with all of the lyrics to La Vie Boheme, which is like the long 8-minute song with all the references to every gay culture thing in the 80s.
Yes.
And then I went and researched every single one that I didn't know. I didn't know what Sontag was, so then I looked it up.
Yep.
And then I was like, oh, okay. And then I learned some things by researching all of the lyrics in La Vie Boheme as a child. It was fun.
Urban Dictionary.
Yes.
Yes. There's a lot of really good. What is that word? Like it has the
You're
power
the
to
speech
educate you.
therapist in our
I-
trifecta.
I
You're supposed to be the
know.
words.
I am.
Not to put a demand on you. I'm so sorry. My deepest apologies.
I'm gonna be honest, it's been a pretty weird week. Language is one of those things that's gonna be tough for me today.
Fair.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, wanted to bring that to the table.
Yeah.
So, like we said, today we're doing a interview slash we really wanted to figure out how we wanted to do interviews on this project, whether we want to ask questions or kind of have someone else host the situation.
This situation. This is a situation. Now I'm hosting it.
Does that make this a situationship?
I hope not. There's enough of those. We don't need one more.
What is this? Let's define it. Host the podcast. So, Gabby.
That's you guys.
I gave Gabby, the freedom to do with what they wanted. So, today we're going to talk about PDA, which is
Pathological demand avoidance, or I know McKenna's gonna be like, okay, so it can also be called pervasive drive for autonomy, which is like kind of the better, I think, like more strengths-based way to describe it. Like a lot of people that have it and like advocate for themselves are like, this is what I would prefer it to be called, because pathological is like right in the name. It's like, you're doing it for a bad, like it makes it sound worse than it is. Pathological demand avoidance, PDA, is like a specific profile of autism. So this is how we came up with it. I was like, I am an occupational therapist. I work in early intervention, and I was like, I feel like I'm noticing this in like a bunch of kids on my caseload, and I'm also noticing it in myself all the time. And McKenna was like, you should talk about that on our podcast. And so now I'm here.
Here we are.
So it comes from like one specific study that someone did in the 1980s where they noticed that was like where the profile was first identified.
Okay.
Was like someone doing a study on like autistic kids. So Elizabeth Newsom is the person that did the original research and was like, okay, so these kids all have a diagnosis of autism, but there's also like some other things that are going on.
Sure.
And so like the defining characteristics are basically like what's in like a compulsive desire to get away from like all demands, not just like ones that are like basically the defining thing is like anytime their autonomy is overridden, it basically sends them into like fight or flight.
Right.
And so anything that is a demand that is perceived as like, oh, I might not like be able to get like I might not feel like my own autonomous person, instantly like fight or flight response.
Yeah. So it involves your nervous system.
Yes.
And it is like an override of your nervous system response. So that's what you're tapping into and have very little control over how you act once you have had a demand put on you.
For sure.
Okay.
For sure. Yeah.
Cool.
Once there's a demand, it's just like complete fight or flight response.
Yeah.
So,
how fun.
How very fun.
And is this something that can be just reactive to a situation, or can it sometimes also be anticipatory, like that you see something coming and then have the reaction before it's even happened?
Anecdotally, from like my clinical experience, there's definitely some kids that like they see me walk into the room and they're like, ah, this bitch. There's gonna be, because like not just like a personal thing, but like they know like my presence is associated with, okay, this person's going to put demands on me. They're going to make me do things that I don't want to do, and they're going to override my autonomy. So like, nope. Then I have to kind of work around like, okay, how can I help this kid improve their skills without like putting them on high alert, basically.
I wouldn't
trust back in.
Yes. Yeah.
I was just gonna say, I wonder if that's anticipatory or if it is your relationship is a demand.
For sure.
You know
For sure.
what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I guess you wouldn't know. Like that would be up to the person to be able to explain that to you. And they're 3.
And they're 3. Yeah. And they're 3 and they can't talk yet. Yeah. That's like one of the things about PDA is that like it's not just demand in the sense of like, oh, like I'm demanding that you do something. Like it doesn't have to be like an actual thing that's said in a demanding way. Like literally being perceived by other people can be a demand. Like being knowing that you have to like perform to a certain expectation.
Yeah.
That's a huge demand.
And you can put demands on yourself, right?
Yes. That was another thing that I learned in like the research was that like even like internal demands that's like one of the defining characteristics of PDA, and one of the things that like helps to differentially diagnose is like even internal demands like hunger or like thirst. People will still be like, oh, that's a demand I don't want to do. Like you'll be like McKenna, I saw your eyes light up. You're like, oh, I think that's why I do the things that I do. Yeah. Yeah. So even or like I'm tired and I should go to bed, but going to bed is a demand, so I'm going to stay up late and play video
Okay.
games.
Very good to know.
But then you also kind of get into like there's so if there's a so demand avoidance is really big with like neurodivergent population in general. Like we
Sure.
all are kind of like, I have like limited executive function. I have limited energy. So like I don't want to do like I want to only do the demands that are like important. So
Sure.
sometimes you could just avoid a demand because you don't want to, and that's not necessarily PDA.
Okay, yeah, I was gonna ask because I don't think that I have PDA type, but I do have a lot of executive dysfunction. So I was gonna ask what it feels like and the difference of like if you're just executive dysfunctioning and don't want to do that demand, or that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, that was like a whole thing I went down a rabbit hole about because yeah, there's a lot of like executive function stuff where you're just like, oh, I do want to do this, but like my brain just can't.
Task
Especially the like
initiation.
going to bed. That's a good
Yeah,
one.
yeah, and it's like, oh, but the couch is really comfy. Like, yeah, so there's a lot of overlap, and like it doesn't I don't, it's not like a standalone definition by itself anyway, so it doesn't like super matter. Um, but like, yeah, I think there's a lot of other reasons that you could avoid a demand that are common in other like neurodivergence that aren't necessarily PDA.
Okay, yeah, makes sense.
Well, I wonder if the classification of the PDA goes back to that fight or flight response. Like, I know that I'm trying to think of a specific example where I avoid something because it's my nervous system responding, and I think of people pleasing and being in situations where there's the demand of socialization, and I go directly into people pleasing because my body almost feels like it's in a fawn response because there's, more than the fight or flight nowadays. There's the flight, fawn, freeze.
Yes.
Did I say freeze twice?
No.
Okay.
You did great.
Language is languaging.
Good job.
But I would have to say, like, I wonder if that's the component where it's like the task initiation versus PDA. You know what I mean? I don't know.
The other thing that is like one of the defining characteristics too is that like the strategies that you employ to like get away from the demand a lot of times take more like time and energy and resources than it would have to like just do the demand in the first place. I feel like that is something that is like I notice a lot with kids that have it is I'm like you could literally just like wash your hands and not have like a 45-minute meltdown about it and throw chairs and or you could just but like because their nervous system's in fight or flight they literally can't. So I feel like that's kind of one of the characteristics that's like define like if you could be just avoiding a demand because you don't want to, but if you're like literally using up a lot of extra like time and resources and energy to get away from the demand, then I think that's more PDA.
That makes total sense because like diagnoses and stuff even are based on like does it affect your daily life?
Yes.
And that like determines like are you at the level of a diagnosis versus not a level. And so that makes sense if you're taking up so much energy that it's severely affecting your life.
Yes.
Whereas you could have just done the thing for less energy. That makes total sense.
Yeah.
Well, and I think there's also sorry, what were you gonna say?
I was just gonna say that's like all like autism and ADHD diagnostic criteria is like it's not different. It's not that nobody ever does these type of behaviors. It's just a difference in like quantity, not quality,
Yeah.
or like of impact on your life.
Yeah, because like the things that a neurotypical person may also do a similar thing, but it's not to the level of intensity that
Yeah.
neurodiverse is at.
And what I was going to say too is like from a communication standpoint, when someone has a demand put on them, and for example, they do have a behavior, is that behavior communication or is it that fight or flight response? And that's something that I think is being untangled on the spot
Yeah.
with, autistic kids and
Yeah,
needing to understand that.
it literally is like a super new thing. So the study comes from the 1980s, but they didn't actually even use the word pathological demand avoidance until 2008. And then like the pervasive,
Really?
yeah, and then the pervasive drive for autonomy is like I think that's in like the last couple years or so. I didn't look into that specifically.
Huh.
But
interesting.
yeah,
Well, it's the
so
same thing,
yeah,
right?
it is. It's just like a cooler way to call it that doesn't maybe hurt so many people's feelings or make them feel bad.
Like our progression from Asperger's to
Yes.
using autism scales. Yeah.
Yeah.
Language
We
is
don't use
important.
that one anymore because that guy did a lot of bad stuff.
Okay, here's my question. Are all PDAers neurodivergent? And then my next question is, are all neurodivergent people PDA? It sounds like that is a no, because Bree
Yeah.
doesn't feel like she has a
Yeah, I'm
PDA profile.
associated to that. I think
Yeah.
because I don't know, a lot of times when I was going through diagnostic stuff, a lot of times why I wouldn't count myself as ADHD was because I was like, but I can do these things, or like I am disorganized, but I can line things up and organize them. And like, so
Yeah.
then I didn't really feel that like I don't have that stopping point where I just like,
Okay.
I definitely have the like once where I'll be like stuck of like, okay, well, I don't want to go to bed because that means that my time is over, that I need more alone time than that, or whatever like that. But I don't really feel that like hard stop that keeps me from doing it.
And like that interruption on your daily living.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, so no would be the answer to the second question.
What about the first question? I know.
So according to like stuff that I've read, yes, like it's specifically like a sub profile of autism. Like I haven't read any articles that are on like PDA and ADHD or anything like that. But I like personally, I feel like it just the labels are kind of like all overlapping anyway. So like
Yeah.
I if I were treating a client, like I wouldn't care if like, oh, this person has like autism and PDA or this person has like PDA but like is not autistic. Like I would just kind of treat the same things anyhow.
Yeah.
So I don't think it matters so much, but I do think that it comes from some level of like executive dysfunction though. So I feel like in order for you to have that level of executive dysfunction, you're probably going to be neurodivergent in some other aspects. But again, that's just me like
because I've heard that.
yeah.
I've heard that.
And don't quote that. Do not cite that in an academic paper.
Our podcast is not for educational purposes in that way. So this is our experience.
I've heard that holistic people can also have a PDA profile. So, but at the same time, I feel like humans, when demands are put on them, can feel discomfort, and it's again that fight or flies, fight or flies, fight or flight. It's that fight or flight.
We have to come up with a way to say that that's easier to say.
I know, it's so true. It's that fight or flight interrupting the everyday activities that is to be worked with and supported. I am very careful about the word fix. I am very careful about the word intervening too. But like from a communication standpoint, again, it goes back to that like, well, if they do have a PDA profile, you actually can communicate in a variety of ways that can lessen demands on folks, such as like giving more autonomy, um, using autonomous language, giving choice. Like I know parenting choices of like, okay, you can have these two choices and you get to choose the choice. Like that is an example of working with PDA. So it's just interesting because I think too as we've been like working on this podcast and like really talking about the diagnoses of ADHD and autism and it's interesting because it's like, does it even matter like what it is? It just matters like what each person is bringing to the table, and like working with that and having a place to work from.
Yeah.
And goes
I'm
back
always
to
saying
like,
this.
yeah, and goes back to like that context, right? Of like, this all just gives context to start from in terms of working with someone, or like having a relationship with this someone, or whatever.
Yeah. I think it's important to remember too that when we're talking about non-autism and ADHD, there's also a huge spectrum of other neurodiversities in there.
There
So
is.
Yeah.
PTSD
Yeah.
doesn't have a, diagnosis like that,
Yeah.
but you can still have those PDA type things probably.
Yeah.
I would imagine that people with like traumatic brain injury probably also have similar results. And so it was, even though it's not our experience, there are so many other diagnoses in that umbrella.
There are.
There are
Yeah.
lots of ways to be neurodivergent for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think even mental health has a lot to do with neurodivergence, like bipolar and depression and anxiety. And
There's probably a PDA profile in all of those that just nobody's talking about yet.
yeah. Well, and it goes back to just there's so much unknown about all of the things.
Oh yeah.
About all the things. But
So sorry.
no, that's all we gotta say.
Then I read this other article that kind of goes along with it that was like, okay, if like what exactly is being pathologized in like PDA.
Correct.
And it was basically like if like it was basically like a scholarly way of saying if a kid doesn't want to do the thing that you're trying to get them to do, maybe it's just a skill issue and you suck at it. Like that was the conclusion of their entire scholarly paper, was like how like maybe like is it that they're avoiding the demand, or is it that like you haven't made it like relevant and like cool enough and all the stuff that they like taught us to do in OT school that is hard to actually do in practice.
Probably trauma-informed therapy.
For sure.
Too.
For sure.
Yeah. Of just knowing, oh, if this is putting a person into a traumatic nervous system response, that's too much to put on another human, and we can pivot.
The text that I sent you the other day where I was like, literally 80% of my job is just telling preschool teachers, hey, this kid has been through trauma. Like, maybe be nice to them. Maybe just like, don't be a dick. Sorry.
One of the things that we started talking about in prep for this interview was that your information came from both social media.
Oh yes.
And then yeah, I'm excited for this. But it came from social media and clinical research that has been clinically researched. How do you say that?
Research that has been, I think,
peer review.
10 out of 10.
Again, this is a hard day for my brain. But I would love to just open up the floor to the reality that there is so much information out on social media that is and isn't backed by research. And I wanted to talk about, what we all think about it. So, any thoughts? Because I think it's harmful, to be honest, versus helpful.
The social media part, or like the fact that it can be any information.
I think it can be weaponized, and it's not the whole picture, and it's not nuanced, and it's not individualized, and people can take the information and think that it's individualized and think that it's about them or someone that they're dating or someone that they're treating, and it actually is like something else going on.
It's interesting because I can see that 100%. Like I think the internet in general is that problem.
Sure.
But I also think that I'm someone that in the way that my brain works, I can't come up with concepts on my own. So like I would never question in my daily life, like, is this something normal that's going on with me or like whatever. So I basically relied on social media to learn new things about myself, to be interested in finding something new and that kind of thing, because then I took it and did research from it. But I would have never done the research because I didn't have a jumping off point that like interested me in that thing to get to the research.
Correct.
Yeah.
And I think that there are not enough people doing that.
Yeah.
Where they are going
Yeah.
from social media, seeing, words like gaslighting, words like
Gaslighting goes up on the shelf. No one's allowed to use the word gaslighting anymore until TikTok figures its shit out.
I feel like narcissist is in there.
Oh,
yeah.
Like, yeah.
Narcissist is huge. It's huge.
Narcissist.
Narcissistic abuse.
I feel like there's a third one that like, just like getting
yeah.
So much attention.
Yes. Yeah.
It's like those hotspot words. I don't know what they're called, but
Buzzwords.
Yeah.
I mean,
buzzwords.
maybe. Yeah.
So I completely agree with you, especially as being someone who, I think we talked a couple episodes before about like Gestalt language processing and Gestalt language learning and thinking about how concepts that are seen outside of ourselves are taken into our brains and then processed and then like expelled out from there. So I see that like social media is an incredible tool for that.
There's a lot of gestalts, social media.
There are.
For better or for worse.
But I think that that's what makes you a critical thinker and like doing the actual follow-up and like I think yes, it's great for exposure to have that information out there, but it can be harmful.
So when I was doing some research for this episode, again, not a lot, that was kind of my experience was like on social media when I was looking up like pathological demand avoidance, it was a lot of like, oh, your kid won't do what you ask them to, like try this. They probably have pathological demand avoidance. Like not just like take all the nuance out of it. Just like, oh, this is what this is, and like if your kid does X, Y, and Z, then they 100% have this, and here, but pay $300 for this master course that I'm going to teach about how to like deal with it. And then the scholarly articles that I were like when I went on Google Scholar, that was more of like a like that's where I got the one that was like what exactly is being pathologized here, like how like it was more about like strategies to be helpful and also like a questioning of like on an existential level, like does this diagnosis mean anything? Does it like the scholarly sources were definitely like engaging with it in like a critical thinking way, and Instagram and TikTok have never seen critical thinking or nuance. Like it's just a but I also like I hear what you're saying too, Bree, that like there's a lot of stuff that like I probably wouldn't know that I had autism if it weren't for social media either, because I would have just been like, oh, everybody just finds life really difficult for no reason. That's what my dad said.
But I think that's true with social media in like a lot of other realms too, because like I'm deep into the home buying TikTok because I watch
And how's that going for you?
realtors, like I have everybody on there. But anyways, there's a lot of people on there doing similar things where they're like, I do market analysis and this is where the market's going and it's gonna, go down in this time. So you need to sign up with me so that we can buy a house when it's time. And like it's then there'll be people commenting on it that are like, here's the facts of what is really going on. Yeah, grifting and just yeah. So I think that's true in a lot of different areas. And it's also challenging with social media because you don't have to have much education or much, knowledge on how to access information to access that information. Whereas like if you have that critical thinking, but you don't have the education to be able to access research articles and read them and like know what parts to look at. And like we went through school where we were taught how to read a research article. Like I remember having classes on like just breaking down what you're looking at and like how to know whether it's a case study with 3 participants that's not very good or
and that is a huge privilege too, for sure.
Yeah, for sure. So it's just it's hard with people having access to that, and it's easy to access. Which I love. One of the things that I love about TikTok right now is people starting to do more educational content on there. Like for Black History Month, I was following this lady that did a different story on like not well known African American stories from early years. And it was so cool. And like I normally don't watch long TikToks, but every time hers would pop up, I'd be like, ooh, okay, what's this one about? So it's cool to see people's storytelling abilities and like hopefully more of that and more like peer fact checking starts to happen on them. And yeah.
Yeah, like it's both. And like it's not just one or the other. And because it does do so much for education purposes. But again, I think that the
And
the issue is that I think that there's a lot of trust too in thinking that these creators are telling like factual things as well. So that sounds really cynical to say, and I don't like feel that way as a consumer. Like I think my autism very much lies in taking things at face value.
But I think that cynicism has developed over time because I see that as someone that can see the bigger picture and gets so frustrated at things like that. You develop the cynicism because you're like, you've learned in the past, I trusted, I shouldn't have trusted. Now I'm trusting, but then I'm like, oh, halt.
Wait,
I
yes.
can't trust. What do I do now?
So I feel like on social media, that's like the thing is that the people that are like content creators have to like tell you a story and like have to sell you kind of like a story about like, oh, if your kid does this, they have PDA. Oh, if you have like if the I don't know home buying words, but like if the market does this, like you have to like buy this thing or whatever. And like real life doesn't have like clear cut like beginning, middle, and end. So like if someone is selling you that like not successful, like concise, like wrapped up, neat ending, that's exactly what they're doing is they're just like selling you a product. Whereas the scholarly research is like, yeah, we don't know what the fuck's going on, and none of it's going to be satisfying, and none of it like you're just gonna
The conclusion
you're
is
just
do
gonna
more
be
research.
frustrated. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Further research is needed in these areas. That's the only thing you ever get that's close to like a satisfying conclusion.
Yeah.
But you can't sell that. So I feel like that's where social media breaks down.
Can you even perpetuate that though? If there's no research that needs to be done on something, can you as a clinician walk into a session and be like, I think I see PDA going on here? And I actually don't ever say that with mine because they're 18 to 21. They're in an academic setting. Really doesn't do much to talk about their diagnosis. It does way more to talk about what I see and how we can support that. Knowing that it's not completely backed up by research. I mean, is this just like a clue, if you will, rather than what actually is going on? Is the answer that there needs to be more research? Is the answer, I don't know. Is that a
It,
question?
I mean, there's always going to be like a state of we could do more research in this area. I'm going to be honest. I've never told a parent of a kid that I think has PDA that I think they have it,
Yeah.
just because like in the school setting, that's sort of like opening up a can of worms that you don't
Yeah.
want to have to deal with. And I I've had one parent that was like I've done a lot of research and like my kid has PDA and she's correct. He does. Like so with that with not that knowledge and that parent I've shared like strategies about like oh here's what works best with like PDA, but I don't feel prepared to have the conversation with parents that like are still, I mean, my kids are 3, 4, and 5. Like their parents are still processing their kids' autism diagnosis.
Mm-hmm.
And then throwing in another thing that's like, hey, I think your kid is gonna have lifelong struggles with any like authority figure and just like the demands of daily life. Doesn't feel like a good thing to do to them. So
Doesn't feel
yeah,
supportive.
no. Sometimes I will say to like other clinicians, I'll kind of use like, oh, this kid like benefits from like low arousal, like collaborative problems. So that's kind of like my way of saying like this kid has PDA without saying outright this kid has PDA is just being like, oh, they benefit more from like a like basically like a clinical way of saying if you get into a power struggle with this kid, you are going to lose. And also you shouldn't be getting into a power struggle in the first place. Therefore, what are you doing? Just let it go.
Yeah. I think that's what I see most of all with my students in regards to PDA is that there is an
Just don't get into
unnecessary.
a power struggle.
That's the thing is that there is a power struggle and there shouldn't be. And because there's a power struggle, there is elevated fight or flight responses. And I work in two different classrooms. One is fairly compliant based, one is way more autonomy based. And you can walk into both classrooms and feel
The
the
vibes.
difference.
Yes.
It's night and day in terms of how the staff feels and how they interact with their students, how the students are interacting with each other, how students are like free to take a sensory break. They're free to work in the hallway. They're free to be using noise canceling headphones, and in the other environment it's just not that way. And
So to clarify for people that may not know what you're talking
sure.
about, the one that you're talking about first is the autonomous classroom.
Correct.
They're allowed to kind of do what they want to do. They're allowed to take the breaks that they need or use the devices that they need.
Correct.
And the other classroom was compliant.
Yeah,
which is like an expectation of them complying.
That is so, which in itself is a demand. And for example, I'll just tell you the days of each classroom because I think that'll show like compliant versus autonomous. But in the compliant based classroom, students are expected to walk in, go to 3 different cycles of 45-minute classes, like kind of a block schedule, and then they have lunch and then they go home. And they are expected to be quiet when others are speaking. They are expected to not stim with their voice or with fidgets, even though, like, we talk in IEP meetings about how fidgets are one of their accommodations. I'm having a really hard time at work right now.
That's my favorite thing is when movement breaks and fidgets are literally in the IFSP or IEP, and then the teachers are still like, "Oh, you can't have it because you didn't behave this morning." I'm like, "Nope, that's not what it says in this legal document."
They can't do it because it's distracting to themselves or others or the teacher. It's like that's not that's ableism in practice.
It honestly is.
Which I can only do so much coaching on that before it just feels I mean, I just can't change the whole
there's no
compliance-based classroom.
No.
I've got to put out one small. Actually, what I have to do is build relationships because it's been really hard for me to work as someone who is rigid thinking, as someone who's very justice oriented, as someone who cares a lot about really all of the people in the classroom and know how the fuck to run this marathon because it's a marathon. It cannot be done in a sprint. I've been talking a lot to our therapist about
our therapist. We have the same therapist. And we do have a parasocial relationship with her. We both think that if we met under different circumstances, we would be friends. And we're correct.
Does your therapist know that you guys know each other?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
I was gonna say
Sure
she
she
does,
does.
but she hasn't ever like acknowledged it, but only because she's very like rigid code of ethics. Like if I see you in the grocery store, I cannot acknowledge you. We've had way too much talks about your trauma. Like I know too much. Yes.
She's super professional.
She is.
Love her. Every time me and Gabby get together, we usually will talk about our
Debrief.
therapy.
Yes, literally. I
It's
have
like-
like my therapy session with our therapist, and then I have my post-therapy session.
And it always ends in us just like singing her praises.
She's great. Yeah, we're always like, she's fantastic.
So good at her job.
So good.
Anyway,
I relate though. Like that's how a lot of the preschool classrooms that I'm in are very like rigid and compliance based, and I'm like, can't regulate this kid. Like you're dysregulating him every single second that he's here.
Correct.
So anyway, go on.
Well, and that's the thing is I think that there is such a lack of education and integration of neurodivergent, sensory friendly classrooms.
Yeah.
And I don't think that pressure or demand, if you will, can lie on one person. I don't think it can rely on the speech therapist that's serving 2 days a week. It can't rely on the OT that's coming in twice a month, which is just unfortunate because that is the intervention that is happening and that is the education that is being brought about. But it's just our culture.
Yeah.
And it again is a marathon and can't be changed overnight. So it's been pretty disheartening, but I am working with my therapist about running the marathon of having, very small goals, very like I have to basically tolerate this environment, and that's kind of part of the goal, but doing little seeds here and there, planting those seeds of
Seeds
Hey,
of change.
seeds of
Seeds of
change. Is that a
change.
thing?
Yes.
It's a
Oh.
thing.
I will plant seeds of change.
Yeah. Those lines, this may be out of either of your scopes, and feel free to say if it is, but is there anything that you would tell people to look for if they're looking for a classroom for their kid and they're like maybe there's those buzzwords of like, does the classroom use like, sensory based or like, I don't know, any other things that people could look for? Yeah.
I always tell parents that like I feel like the most important thing is the vibe check.
Mm.
Honest, like I think because like you were
Do
saying,
the in-person like
yeah,
walkthroughs, do the
yeah,
see a class.
yeah.
Like,
Because I get a lot of parents that are like, oh, I toured this preschool and this preschool, and like there are like specific markers of like good things in a preschool classroom that like you can kind of Google. But like I feel like the vibe is the most important. Like if a classroom is super like compliance based and the kids are really dysregulated and the teacher is really stressed out, like you can feel it when you walk in.
mm.
At least I can. Maybe I I don't know if parents can, but I feel like they kind of can. Like you'll kind of know like, oh, something feels kind of off here.
Mm.
Trust your gut is basically the advice I would give. McKenna.
I would go further, and if I was a parent looking for a preschool, I would come with a list of questions to ask during the interview
That's
of,
smart.
yeah, of, if my child were to do this, how would you respond? Or if this happened in the classroom, what would happen? Or have you ever had a student like this before? Um, I think preschool is very different than the job that I'm in, particularly because I'm in public education and I'm at the very end of the line. And if you were a parent touring our facility, you would see the sensory room and you would probably, I mean, that's what happened when I toured as a
And you would
prospective employee. I was like, oh my gosh, this is going to be fantastic. When in reality, the other location that I'm working at, like the second classroom, is way more neurodivergent friendly. I feel like the sensory room is a cop out for them actually practicing. And
my mentor at the like district that I work at works in the preschool for like the moderate to severe kids, and she's the OT at that preschool, and she said that when she first started, that's exactly how they were using the sensory room was they like no structure, no like activities, no like planning, just like okay, go in, teachers are gonna like chill out for like 30 minutes and
yeah.
so this might help you because she just like my mentor is fantastic. She's very like soft spoken, but she also is like will not let things go. Which I feel like is the like yeah, she's very serious about the things that she's communicating and like and you get the seriousness without her ever raising her voice. Like it's just she was just like, "Hey, you need to be doing like structured activities. Here's an example of things you could do. Here's like, and it took 2 years. It literally like, and she was of her like basically going into like one teacher's classroom every single time that they were using the sensory room and being like, "You're fucking up," but like in a very nice and professional manner.
And that goes right back to that marathon
Yes.
anecdote of
Change, yeah.
I have that conversation with her every week where I'm like, I'm just going into these Head Start classrooms and I'm not doing anything and I can't if I mean not even I can't even get to the conversation about PDA. I'm like these people don't want an autistic kid in their classroom.
Yeah.
Like yeah.
Yeah. So
it's not just, yeah, like you said, like doing the tour, doing like attending a day of classes, like to see what's happening in the classroom, not just the physical space that they exist in. Are they using it in a good way? Are they using it like constructively and not just as a prop for we have this space?
Yeah.
And to be fair,
Just because they have the space doesn't mean that they're using it effectively.
Right. Yeah.
Sorry, what were you gonna say?
to be fair to the people working in this compliance-based classroom at my school, it is not their fault that all of the staff is dysregulated.
Yeah.
I mean, we have an interim principal who is brand new. He is a principal for 3 different schools and happens to prioritize his time at one of the schools because it is the behavioral school of the district. So he's, responding to emergent situations left and right. And so that like top down instruction and or like support rather is not there. So it kind of, starts to be really unstable at the top, and then it goes to the teachers who feel extremely overwhelmed because of the caseload size and the variance of the caseload too. Like there's a way too much variety in the needs of our students. And because of that, their paras are pretty much doing all of the managing of the classroom, making all of these decisions on their own, and they have so much experience of like not being neurodiversity affirming.
Compliance based.
So
Yeah.
that's why it's a mess. And I can see all of that. And I really do like take it all in. And at the end of the day, I go home and my rigid thinking is like, oh my God.
Well, and even taking it higher than that, I mean, it goes even to the societal level of,
Yeah,
yeah,
you're
like
absolutely right.
even this, you said it, principal or district manager or something like that.
Principal.
The principal above him, what support is he getting? Probably
Yeah.
not great. What funding are they getting? Not great.
Also
So
not
this
great.
just
So
trickles
right.
down and down and down, and especially with us decreasing funding for departments of education.
I was
and all
just
this
saying,
Or
maybe
cutting it entirely.
we'll all lose our jobs.
Maybe we'll all lose our jobs.
Yeah, who knows? But like it
fucked
even
up.
comes from that of like you said, you can't really blame the teachers. And then if you go to that, then you're like, well, we can't really totally blame the principal, and then we can't really totally blame like there's so many big things that go into how this could be better run and better, supported and
Yeah, it's a big problem.
yeah.
And I don't this is the thing is like I don't really like I would love to be part of the solution, and I don't know if I'm gonna break as a person to be participating in the solution. So anyway, working on tolerance with my therapist.
Yeah.
And I was gonna quickly just say that like the autonomous classroom is run extremely differently, where pretty much 80% of the students are out at work sites every day. So that leaves a small group in the classroom setting, and they are working on various assignments and can take breaks. And if someone is dysregulated, they can take care of themselves and work on another regulating activity. There's no, you need to do this. If someone is expected to go to a work site and they are dysregulated because of it, they can stay home from the work site and like have the consequences of maybe getting fired, but it's never shame based. It's all, presented to the student of if you want to make that choice, make it, and this is what's going to happen, and like you make the choice. So it's just structured differently. And also those teachers in that classroom have been part of the program for the last 20 years or so, and so they're way more seasoned, and I understand that. So
That
it's
feels
interesting.
Yeah, that setup feels very similar to how I was brought up in homeschooling.
Really?
Yeah, in that you had to get your work done, you had assignments, you had those things, but how you got it done, where you sat, what breaks you took, whatever it was like you finish it when you finish it, you have to finish it today, but you have the flexibility to move how you want to move. And not saying that homeschooling is necessarily the right choice for everyone, but like homeschoolers are just as successful when they get done with school if they've been taught everything
Right.
according to a correct homeschool curriculum, and not just
and not just parents on Instagram doing whatever the fuck they want to. Yes.
Yes, if they're in like structured and get all of the education they're supposed to get when they get homeschoolers can be as successful. So how can we like take some of that aspect of freedom and autonomy and put it into a classroom for those parents that don't want to homeschool but still get that like effect for kids that need that flexibility?
Well, I think it's things that again comes from the top down, smaller class sizes, way more training, way more funding and para support, para educator support. So it could be impossible.
Yeah.
Well,
but it's these small changes, like
Yeah.
you said, like we keep chipping away at it from the levels that we're at, and then
Yeah.
that slowly works up, hopefully.
and I think too, just like when someone is setting up a classroom, like a teacher or like whoever's in charge of it, just like thinking about how much of these demands are like actually necessary things. Because like you said, like you could literally just give someone some work and be like, okay, you have to finish this at some point during the day. And like as long as their needs are met and they feel safe, they're probably still going to finish the work. If they aren't, there's something else going on that like you need to look at. Like people do well when they can.
Yeah. Well, it's like, are we fostering external motivation or are we fostering internal
We're
motivation?
always fostering external motivation. At least this is from what I've seen.
And I
Like,
think how that relates to PDA.
for sure, for sure. That's what you said. Like
That's
it's some
exactly
yeah,
what I said.
yeah.
And what I'll continue to say is that I think it is, there is a lot to be said for people that want to control others unknowingly as well. And this could be as much as, being an educator, giving a student a task, and if they're not doing it as you would want it, being upset by it and like wanting to make them do the task, or if they're doing the task wrong, correcting them. Like
Mhm.
control is definitely a spectrum. So it's not like that things are being done harmfully. It's just not giving the student autonomy to be doing what they're doing. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
It
I've got
does.
a much bigger conversation for sure.
Well, how much time do we have?
All right, another episode.
Yeah.
On control and autism.
Literally.
Talk about manipulation too.
I do feel for like the paras and like the Head Start teachers because like when you are the person responsible for like ensuring compliance in a compliance-based system, like you're dysregulated too. Like
100%.
you want the kid to like do the thing that they're supposed to do, and when they don't do it, you're just like like you don't. It's not like a conscious process of like, oh yes, I'd really love to control this kid. It's just
No.
like a fuck, I'm gonna get like fired. Like,
Sure.
or I look like I'm a bad teacher if
Correct.
this kid. So, like, yeah, it is a way bigger conversation
It
than
is.
just like, it's like, okay, like, how much does it matter if the kid does this particular thing or not?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, and I feel because what were you gonna
80% of
say?
the referrals I get, I feel like I could just be like, does it matter that this kid is doing this? Like, how much does it matter in the grand scheme of things? Oh, they won't sit still at circle time. Okay, well, we're only on this earth for a brief amount of time. So like does it
Totally.
does he have to sit still at circle time? Like
Yeah. And
sorry, I'm in an existential crisis. I didn't mean to put that on everybody else.
but it so speaks to I know me and you have had a ton of conversations about what our profession means and like what it even is based on and the pathologizing of various things, which I know PT is very different because
Yeah.
it's very
Yeah.
We have
concrete.
very solid, like, okay, your child's not walking.
Yeah.
Correct.
Clearly,
Let's
this
make
is
them
an
walk.
issue. Let's
Yeah.
go on, work on it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whereas communication is way more nuanced, and there's so many societal expectations tied to like the purpose of my intervening. And I think that's also pretty difficult when trying to like work with these older students and trying to foster autonomy. It's like we work on those skills and then I watch it just not even being respected in the classroom. So it's just like, what is even the point? But I don't want to be like telling them just to comply and working on that. So it's really difficult. And I know that other SLPs feel this way. Like, I've talked to several friends that feel the same, and it's just an interesting field.
Yeah.
So anyway,
So we got on a broad topic of work things on your end. I was going to ask about how you feel like PDA affects your ability to work. Do you think that it gets in the way of any work? Does it?
That's a good question. So, okay, so there's this thing in PDA that's called, or that I saw in like some of my research, where people with PDA will try to equalize against a demand that's like placed on them. So, if you're telling a kid, like, okay, we're going to color this, they might be like, okay, but I get to choose the next activity. Or I get, okay, after we color, like,
Balancing.
yes, yeah.
Like, okay, I'm choosing, you're choosing.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah. And a lot of times adults don't like that and it gets read as like manipulative, but it's really just kind of them seeking to like feel more safe and secure in not be in that fight or flight state and reassert their autonomy. So I am on a travel contract, so I get paid a shit ton of money. And I feel like that's my way of equalizing with, like, I definitely,
You're like, I am compensated fairly for the
exactly, finally, the respect I deserve. Yeah. Yeah. I'm like, okay, you can make me do a bunch of like silly bullshit little tasks, but you're gonna pay me like a lot of money to do it. So I honestly like the one nice thing about like the school system is that like it is kind of like that homeschool thing where like I have to see certain kids at a certain time and I have to like go to different IEP meetings and stuff, but like the rest of the documentation and stuff, like I can just kind of do whenever I want. Like I don't have to do it during, I don't, no one is like forcing me to like sit at a desk and work for like a certain amount of time, which if that were the case, I feel like I'd have a way harder time.
Yeah.
For sure.
Even without feeling like I have the PDA portion of things, when I was
It
in
is.
that environment and I had to work, the 7 to 5 or whatever, I was useless when I went home.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
completely had nothing left to give
Yeah.
after that. And yeah, it makes a huge difference to be more flexible in when you choose to do certain things. And yeah.
I'm still kind of useless when I get home. But but that's
That's another story.
Yeah.
I think it's more like, am I literally like laying on the floor doing nothing, can't even make myself dinner versus like, can I make dinner? I'm just really tired. Like,
Yes.
Yeah. My first job out of school was like in adults home health, and I was literally booked solid like 9 p.m. to like 5 p.m. and then was doing notes from like 5 to 7 and then like repeat and then come home and do it all. Like yeah, I was not functioning as a person. Yeah. I don't know how I did that, honestly, looking back. You're just like, okay, well, I I made it through somehow. But yeah, definitely a struggle with the demand avoidance. I think part of it was like I knew that if I didn't get the notes in on time, I wouldn't get paid. So I was like, okay, I have sufficient motivation. But yeah.
Well, it was also the energy given out of masking. I mean, I am projecting on you.
You can project.
But showing up
similar.
we've had very similar experiences. So
we've all experienced that, like, oh, you're literally just scheduled the entire day and you can't do anything and you are gonna cry when you
here's
get
your
home.
3 minutes between patients. You better hope that they don't ask any questions or anything so that you can go to the bathroom.
Yes.
Yeah. So
you're just praying for one of them to cancel.
but
then they'll just fill that spot.
Yeah, I remember working home health just as a practicum, and it was probably my mental health has never been worse. It was really, really hard. And I think it was just the demand after demand after demand after demand for so many hours in the day, and then having to like wake up and do it all over again. And then your weekend is kind of like, well, maybe I want to do real life stuff, but not having the energy to do that because you're so burnt out from your week. So I think that we've
patient was for me.
Yeah. I'm so glad that we've landed in jobs that it sounds like we all
better balance, yeah.
Better balance.
Yes.
Or balance to have more than one job.
Yes, yeah. 2 more months.
Yeah. But
soon.
Soon. I was gonna ask one more question about PDA just as an OT. Because PTs aren't or that's you.
I'm not what?
OTs learn about nervous system regulation.
Yes.
And have a hand in that. So
pun intended.
That's right, because you work on hand stuff too.
It was a good pun.
It was. Congratulations to me. Because PDA is putting a demand on someone and then their fight or flight response is kicked in. How can someone work through a fight or flight response? Fight, flight, fawn, or freeze?
So I listened to another podcast that was about PDA. And the one thing that I took away from it was that there are kind of like 3 things that make someone with PDA still be able to do like a demand and still feel successful. And it's if they so the first one is they have to feel like they have some sense of control over the task. Like it's going to be done in a way that like respects my autonomy. The second thing is that I'm going to get something out of it. So like at the end of the task, I'm going to get or doing the task gets me something.
A ton of money.
Exactly. Exactly. Yes. Yeah, so you could use like my work. Like I have some control over like I can choose not to evaluate a kid because I just don't want to. And then the third thing is I know that you have to know that like you'll be able to return to your autonomy after. So like I know that when my contract ends, I don't have to stay at this specific place. I get to go wherever I want.
Yeah.
So that's like using work as an example. Those are like the three things. And then figuring out a way to give kids all three of those things when you're trying to get them to do a particular task in a preschool classroom with the aforementioned Head Start teachers watching your every move and being like, don't give this kid too much autonomy because the second you leave, I'm going to take it all away. That's fun. But like, but that is kind of like something that I work on and try to like educate people on is that like and I have gotten kids to do things that teachers are like, I didn't know he could do that, and I'm like, he can. He just needs to have his nervous system be regulated first and not feel in fight or flight. No one can do much of anything in fight or flight, really.
Well, that was my question: is once someone is in fight or flight, what happens?
Oh, from a biological standpoint.
No.
How you get back to like being able to do the demand after you're dysregulated?
Correct.
Yeah.
Thank you for speaking my language.
Yeah.
Because I'm like,
I was like, I can info dump about the catecholamines if you would like.
maybe I'm
All right, we'll
happy
skip
next
the
week.
catecholamines. I mean, we've all been in fight or flight. Like it's really hard to, first of all, while someone's in fight or flight, do not engage with them and try and get them to keep doing the same task that you were getting them to do, trying to get them to do before.
Yeah.
Don't do that. Blanket statement. I don't think either of you would do that, but I'm just saying it as good general advice.
Well, and we're looking at this too, not just from the perspective of being a teacher doing with someone else. You're also looking at it from an internal perspective because we were talking about that internal PDA too. So like
that's
you're also
true.
don't make yourself keep attempting the task and keep attempting the task even though you're already up here.
That is really good advice, and I should learn it.
That's the real
yes,
you
exactly.
know what you maybe need to do, but you
exactly.
don't necessarily use it. Anyway, so that was one way to do it is, don't keep pushing yourself for it.
Do not keep pushing yourself forward. It kind of, that's like, kind of depends on like your person, like just
individualized.
Kind of like use whatever strategies normally work for you to like get yourself back down, and then like it's bottom up strategies are usually more helpful, especially when you're in fight or flight response already. So like something that kind of grounds your sensory system from like an external perspective rather than trying to like top down your way out of it and think through it logically and be like, oh, I shouldn't be that upset over this. It's just it's just watching the dishes or whatever.
I have it backwards then.
Don't logic your way through
there we go.
Don't intellectualize.
Do not intellectualize.
Yeah. Because I've heard a lot of things like if you're a sensory seeker, like start with something that's like dancing or moving or just spinning or swing, something that's
proprioceptive input. I never shut up about it.
Yeah.
I'm always saying this. Yes.
Before you get to the head of like, okay, now I'm going to go back to the dishes or whatever.
Yes.
Sure.
I live in a 2-bedroom apartment and I have converted the second bedroom into a sensory room. It still has like a guest bedroom and stuff for like when my mom comes to stay.
We love our moms.
We do. But it has like a yoga ball and a yoga mat and like slime and markers so that I can color. And if I am trying to do something and then like, you get stuck in the executive dysfunction loop. We've all been there. Mm-hmm. Sometimes I will just go to the sensory room and like move around a little bit, and then I come back and do the task, and I'm like, oh, okay, that was actually fine.
Yeah, to get out of the environment, do something with your body.
Yeah. Changing,
reintroducing.
For sure. Sometimes literally just changing environments is like so helpful. I know it sounds like such a simple thing, but like literally just like going and taking a break and like doing something else and then coming back to it, that can totally give me like a full nervous system reset. Yeah. Well, it's like pressing the power button and the screen and the lock button.
A little reboot.
Yes.
Did
that actually answer your question at all?
It did.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Great.
Well, and I'm noticing that I am having a hard time in the evening transitioning to being home. Like, I feel like a lot of home demands when I get home, which I've been supporting myself by taking a shower when I get home. So I take a shower, get into like comfy clothes, and then I feel way more regulated to like approach the task. And I don't know if that is transition support or the demand support, but again, we're not pathologizing
Right.
here. We're not like
Yeah.
coming up with whether defining it, I guess is what I'm trying to say. But yeah.
Well, and I
So
think for people too struggling with how do I get out of that in the moment, because it sounds like you struggle not to
I
intellectualize when you're
do.
in that moment of
Yeah.
dysregulation. I think like it's super awesome that you have that where you can see it. Like you can just walk to your room and you see it and you go, okay, I can do one of these options in here. I don't have to think too hard.
Yeah.
Something that I ran into on social media was making a dopa menu.
Mm,
I
yes.
see that. Yeah, yeah.
So making yourself like a list of things that you can do that are in that moment to do those things. So I've
Mhm.
made myself one and put it on my fridge
Yes.
because my house
So
personally
cool.
I can't handle like things being out, so I have to have everything kind of put away, which then also
But then you
messes with the
forget about it.
executive
Yes.
dysfunction of like it's not out, so I don't know what my options are. And again,
I
Mhm.
have a
like, think of
similar
things.
struggle where I'm like, everything needs to be neat and clean and put away. That's how I feel relaxed and calm. And then I forget everything.
And then also, what do I do when
What
I'm
do-
dysregulated? Because now they're all gone.
Right, I know.
My fidgets aren't out, like whatever. Yeah, so the menu is really
Too bad I
hard
put
with
them in that
that.
box and now I'll never see them again. They don't exist anymore.
The doom boxes.
So that's why I really loved having the menu part is because I made it really pretty so I feel okay about it being out and it's like
Mhm.
on the side of my fridge. So I can go
That's
to it when I'm
beautiful.
feeling like I don't have the headspace to think, oh, I could, dance or I could, be upside down or I could, do whatever the thing is, coloring, that kind of thing. I don't have the executive function to think of that thing when I'm dysregulated.
Yes.
So then I go to the menu and I go, okay, the menu will help me decide.
I rarely do.
Yeah.
Don't give me too much credit. I have it and I know that it's there, but sometimes like yeah. I have a nerd
In theory,
version.
this is how
In
the
theory,
process would go when
yes.
you're dysregulated and trying to
Yes.
get back into.
Okay, I have a question for you.
Yes.
With your menu.
Mhm.
Do you ever feel like you have decision paralysis when you like don't know what to do?
Sometimes because of the poor like interoception that I don't know like what it is from that I want, but I broke mine up into like the length of time that the thing takes.
Ugh, love.
And so then I go kind of off of that. If I'm like, I just need like a 30-second like thing to shake me up or whatever, then I'll pick something that's like dance for 30 seconds or shake your body or something like that. Or if I go to it and I'm like, I just want to get out of what I'm doing, I need a long break, and then I'll go to like the longer section that's like coloring or something up there that's a little bit more of a task type thing.
Very cool.
So I feel like that helps some.
Yeah.
But it definitely takes some fine tuning like once you've made your list to
Yeah.
decide like what works for you.
Well, and probably like attuning to that list in times of dysregulation.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
a little bit of brain training.
Is it laminated?
It's not yet. I wish it was.
Do you want me to laminate it for you? I love to
Laminate.
laminate things. I do at my work, and I love. Oh, this is a fun thing that I did this week. Sure, but one of my students was talking about how. Did I show you this picture?
Maybe.
Okay.
Okay, go on.
But I've been doing a lot of support for her because she knows that she can ask for support and that I'll like do the thing, show up for her. So I've been making her a lot of laminated signs to have, and she just asked for one because when she's on the bus, strangers will talk to her, and she named that she feels nervous when that happens. And so we talked about what sign would make her, and it's a piece of paper this big, and it just says, "Please don't talk to me." Piece of paper.
Based.
And I brought it into work to give to her, but before that, most of the adults in the classroom saw it and they were like, "I need one of those."
Yeah. Please don't.
So it was funny. Anyway, love to laminate anything y'all want laminated.
Cool.
But well, thank you so much for coming on and
Thank you
sharing
guys
all
for
your
having me.
insight and being friends with us.
Yeah, you're welcome back anytime.
Oh, this was fun. Thank you guys for having me. I like your fidgets.
I know, never have I noticed myself fidgeting more than when I watch these videos back for editing, and then I'm like, here I am, like.
I literally was just
I'm
telling
going to be
Gabby.
seeking proprioceptive input throughout the entire video, and I won't apologize.
Well, I was like, I washed my feet in the last episode, and I just like,
You're the-
I am moving the whole time, and I'm like, wow, I really have ADHD. Like, not because of
Never
all the
noticed
other things.
I have this weird fidget where I like turn material and then I roll it with my fingernails.
Ooh,
And my whole life.
yeah.
And
Yes.
that's like my number one is I'll just be down here like playing with my pant leg the whole time.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Well, that was so much fun.
That was fun.
Yeah.
Be unapologetically you this week.
Stay regulated.
Right.
They're dying. Good job. We did it.
Ready? And find your joy. We'll just fill in for McKenna. McKenna's gone.
I think we should leave it like this.
God damn it. I keep on
You're talking
forgetting what I'm
to
saying.
Cinderella.
And it takes an extra step for me to, you know, take a step. It takes an extra step for me to take a step back.
Stop that.
Back,
Exactly.
back it up.
They're going to do a little dance.
Okay, this is sidetracked. Echolalia. Did you ever watch the video that was cat? I'm a kitty cat.
And I dance, 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 and I dance, dance, dance.
Cat. I'm a kitty cat. And I dance, 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 and I dance, dance, dance.
Yes.
Yes.